Security will supervise while you pack. That's what he said. After 21 years. No thank you. No handshake. Just a manila envelope and a clock ticking down to noon. I walked past the same kids I trained, all pretending not to see me carry my career in a cardboard box. But that wasn't even the worst part. 2 days later, I found out I was replaced by 3 fresh grads whose salaries together nearly matched mine. That's when it hit me. I wasn't too expensive. I was the perfect scapegoat. What Marcus Mercer didn't know was, I wasn't walking out defeated. I was walking out armed. I had 6 weeks. I had old allies. And I had proof. Let's just say, when the board finally heard my voice, it was loud enough to bring down a king. My name is Daniel Whitaker, and I'm 45 years old. Each morning, I nurse my coffee in a corner office that's felt like home for 21 years at Greystone Solutions. The founder, Richard Gray, used to call me the backbone of the company, praising my dedication during late nights and client emergencies. The familiar hum of elevators and cool glass walls became as much a part of me as my own reflection. But everything shifted when Marcus Sterling, our new CEO, arrived in his tailored Italian suits. His vocabulary drips with efficiency metrics and operational synergies. Corporate poetry that makes veteran employees exchange knowing glances. What he doesn't realize is that 2 decades of honest deals have given me friends in every department, including Tom Reeves, our recently retired sales director, whose files tell interesting stories. Let me start from the beginning. That Tuesday started like any other. I remember straightening my tie in the elevator's polished brass, a habit from thousands of mornings before. The email from Marcus's assistant came at 9:17 a.m. Please see CEO Sterling at your earliest convenience. You know that feeling when your stomach drops before your brain catches up? Yeah, that's the one. Marcus's corner office used to belong to Richard Gray. But where Richard had family photos and industry awards, Marcus kept only a stark modern art piece and his MBA certificate. He didn't stand when I entered, just gestured to the chair across his glass desk while tapping at his phone. Daniel, he said finally, setting the phone aside. Let's make this efficient. The word made my jaw clench. Your position has become too expensive for what you bring to the table. We're restructuring the department to align with our new direction. 21 years reduced to too expensive. I'd worked through pneumonia last winter to close the Peterson account. Missed my nephew's graduation to save the Miller contract. Given up countless weekends to mentor junior staff. Now I sat there, pulse thudding in my ears, while Marcus slid a manila envelope across the desk. HR will process your final paperwork. Badge and keys need to be turned in before you leave, which should be by noon. He checked his watch. Security will supervise while you pack your personal items. Remember when I mentioned those thousands of mornings? Each one flashed through my mind as I stood, legs wooden. 21 years, I said, my voice rougher than intended. Don't I deserve? The severance terms are generous, he cut in. I suggest you take them before that changes. The security guard waited outside. Dave, who I'd bought Christmas gifts for 3 years running. Now he wouldn't meet my eyes. A cardboard box appeared from somewhere, and I started the slow walk back to my office. Ever notice how corridors seem longer when you're living a nightmare? Young faces ducked behind monitors as I passed. These kids I'd trained, celebrated with, coached through their first presentations. They all found something fascinating about their keyboards. Can't blame them. Nobody wants to catch failure like it's contagious. You ever spend decades building something, only to watch it crumble in minutes? That's what it felt like, packing 21 years into a banker's box. Family photos, coffee mug from the 2010 company picnic, the fountain pen Richard gave me when we landed Boeing. Each item felt heavier than the last. The glass walls that once made me feel part of something bigger now just multiplied my humiliation. Every angle showed a middle-aged man carrying his career in a box. Richard's words echoed in my head. You're the backbone here, Daniel. Some backbone. Couldn't even keep my job. The drive home was a blur. Funny how you can navigate perfectly while your world implodes, muscle memory taking over when your brain checks out. I sat in the driveway until dusk, watching shadows creep across the garage door, unable to face walking inside and making this real. Finally, hunger or habit pushed me through the door. The house felt wrong. Too quiet. Too bright. I set the box on the kitchen table, next to yesterday's mail and this morning's coffee mug. Such normal things, mocking how abnormal everything had become. The envelope felt heavy in my hands as I stood under the stove light. My throat burned, but I forced myself to focus on the numbers. 2 months severance, medical coverage through the quarter. A generous package, Marcus had said. But against the mortgage, utilities, groceries, the math refused to work no matter how many times I ran it. The wall clock above the sink seemed louder than ever. Each tick of the second hand felt like a footstep walking away from security, from dignity, from the life I'd built. I stood there listening to time mock me, while 2 decades of dedication evaporated like morning dew. The next morning, I sat at our home office desk before dawn, coffee going cold beside a stack of bills. Amazing how fast you can update a resume when desperation's driving. 21 years of achievement, condensed into bullet points and results-oriented phrases that felt hollow even as I typed them. You know that feeling when you're watching water boil? That's what checking email became. Every refresh brought nothing but promotional offers and LinkedIn notifications that felt like paper cuts. Daniel Whitaker viewed your profile. Hiring managers looking back, probably wondering why a guy my age was suddenly on the market. I pulled up our household budget spreadsheet, the one Sarah and I had barely touched since setting up autopay years ago. 2 months severance looked decent on paper until you laid it against reality. Mortgage, car payment, utilities, groceries, insurance. The math was brutal. We had some savings, thank God, but watching that cushion deflate month by month made my stomach clench. Remember when saving for retirement was the big worry? Now I was calculating how many weeks until we'd have to start making choices about which bills to pay. The kind of choices I'd never imagined making at 45. My phone buzzed. Jerry from accounting. One of the few who still had the decency to keep in touch. Free for coffee? The diner near the office hadn't changed. Same cracked leather booths, same coffee rings on the laminate tables. The familiarity hurt in a way I hadn't expected. Jerry slid into the booth, looking tired around the eyes. They filled your position, he said without preamble. 3 fresh grads from that consulting firm Marcus likes. Entry level. But guess what their combined salaries add up to? My coffee cup froze halfway to my mouth. Don't tell me. Within $5 grand of what you were making. Jerry's voice was low, bitter. Some cost-cutting measure, huh? But that's not even the worst part. You remember those efficiency reports Marcus kept waving around? Heat crawled up my neck as Jerry laid it out. The numbers weren't adding up. Literally. Expenses being shuffled between departments. Losses buried under creative accounting. The board was getting carefully curated reports that painted a rosy picture, while the real books told a different story. He's not cutting costs, Jerry said. He's hiding them. And using people like you as cover. Back home, I pulled up the company's quarterly statements. Public information, but now I was looking with new eyes. Little discrepancies jumped out. Nothing obvious enough to trigger alarms, but together they formed a pattern. The kind of pattern that makes accountants nervous and shareholders angry. My hands were shaking by the time I closed the laptop. This wasn't just a middle-aged guy being pushed out for cheaper talent. This was something uglier, more calculated. Marcus wasn't trimming fat. He was building a facade while the foundation crumbled. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, its shadows wheeling above me like my thoughts. Sarah's breathing had evened out hours ago, but sleep felt impossible. The question kept circling in my chest, getting heavier with each rotation. How many others had been sacrificed to hide his mess, and what could one fired employee do about it? The fan kept turning, offering no answers. But somewhere between midnight and dawn, that question changed from a weight to something else. Something that felt almost like purpose. The gray morning matched my mood as I sat at the kitchen table, legal pad in front of me. I'd always been a list guy. 21 years of project planning does that to you. But this morning's list had exactly one item. Find proof or forget it. I stared at those words until they blurred, then drew a thick line through them. Who was I kidding? You ever feel like you're watching your life through a window? That's what these mornings had become. Sarah had already left for her teaching job, leaving behind a coffee pot half full and a sticky note with a heart on it. The house felt too big, too quiet. The kind of quiet that gives your thoughts too much room to echo. I pulled up our bank app, another morning ritual I'd grown to hate. The numbers stared back at me, each one smaller than the day before. Watching our savings tick down was like watching a countdown clock to what? I couldn't even finish that thought. My throat tightened as I scrolled through recent transactions. Grocery store, gas station, insurance payment, each one taking another bite out of what we'd built. Just temporary, I muttered to the empty kitchen. But the words sounded hollow, like everything else lately. Remember when being good at your job meant something? I'd spent the past 3 weeks in interviews, each one more deflating than the last. We're looking for someone who can grow with the company. Translation. You're too old. The role requires an energetic self-starter. Translation. Same thing. We'll keep your resume on file. Translation. Don't call us. I came home from the latest rejection with a headache drilling between my eyes. The house was still quiet. Sarah wouldn't be home for hours. I sat in my home office, surrounded by certificates and awards that suddenly felt like props from someone else's life. What did I actually have? A hunch about Marcus's creative accounting. Water cooler whispers about hidden losses. My reputation, which used to mean something when I had a desk and a title to back it up. Now, I was just another middle-aged guy who wasn't a good fit for the company's future direction. My phone sat on the desk, screen dark. I picked it up, thumb hovering over the contacts. Stopped at Tom, retired sales director. The name brought back memories of late nights closing deals, of Tom showing me the ropes when I was green. He'd retired 2 years ago, but we'd stayed in touch with occasional lunches and holiday cards. Tom had been there through the tough years, back when the founder was still alive and integrity meant more than quarterly projections. He'd seen the company weather 3 recessions without a single layoff. Loyalty goes both ways, he used to say. Or it's not loyalty at all. I opened a new message. Started typing. Hey, Tom, been a while? Coffee soon? Deleted it. Tried again. Need your perspective on something. Backspace, 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 until the cursor just blinked at me, steady as a metronome. The sun was sliding behind the blinds now, casting prison bar shadows across my desk. I set the phone face down, but I could still feel it there, like it was waiting for me to make a decision. What would Tom think of all this? He'd watched Marcus's arrival from the safety of retirement, seen the changes starting. Maybe he'd noticed things I hadn't. Maybe. I pushed back from the desk. This was desperation talking, the kind that comes when your pride's been kicked and your bank account's bleeding, the kind that makes you see conspiracies and coincidences because the truth, that you're just another disposable cog, is too hard to swallow. The shadows from the blinds grew longer. I sat there, listening to the house settle around me, feeling the weight of every second I wasn't earning a paycheck, every second I wasn't providing like I should be, every second that proved Marcus right about me being too expensive, too old, too everything. The phone stayed face down. The cursor kept blinking, and somewhere in the gathering dark, my question from last night, what could one fired employee do, started to feel less like purpose and more like pride I couldn't afford. I barely slept that night. By 6 a.m., I was already nursing my second coffee at Mel's Diner, watching early risers shuffle past the window. The place hadn't changed since the 90s. Same peeling vinyl booths, same tired waitresses, same coffee that could strip paint. But that morning, its unchanging nature felt comforting. The bell above the door chimed. Tom walked in, looking exactly as I remembered. Silver hair neat, posture military straight despite being in his 60s. Some habits die hard, especially for old sales directors. Daniel. He slid into the booth across from me. You look like hell. I managed a weak smile. Thanks for meeting me so early. Figured you wouldn't be sleeping much anyway. He ordered coffee, black, then studied me over the rim of his mug. Heard about what happened. Marcus didn't waste any time, did he? Steam curled up between us as I told him everything. The firing, the 3 junior replacements, the whispers about hidden losses. Tom listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. You're not the only one, he said finally. I didn't exactly retire by choice 2 years ago. That hit me like a punch to the gut. Tom had been a legend in sales, consistently our top performer. The story went that he'd chosen a quiet retirement to spend time with his grandkids. Marcus gave me the same line, Tom continued. Too expensive for what you bring. Guess 25 years of relationships and client trust can't compete with cheaper salaries and prettier PowerPoints. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive, sliding it across the formica with a dry smile. Good thing I learned to keep receipts. My hand shook slightly as I picked it up. What's on here? Tom pulled out his laptop. Everything? Contracts, invoices, internal memos. I started collecting them when things felt off. He opened a folder and turned the screen toward me. Look at these payments. I leaned in, coffee forgotten. Row after row of transactions, all to a company I'd never heard of. Shield Consulting LLC? Shell company, Tom said. No employees, no office, no actual consulting. Just a bank account that Marcus controls through his brother-in-law. My eyes widened as I followed the money trail. Hundreds of thousands flowing out. Nothing of value flowing back in. The room seemed to tilt as pieces clicked into place. "He's not cutting costs," I breathed. "He's bleeding the company dry while making it look like efficiency." Tom's shoulders sagged, the weight of it visible. I recognized that look. The same pain I felt watching something we'd helped build being hollowed out from the inside. "The board's being fed doctored reports," he said. "But they do their annual deep dive review in 6 weeks. Marcus has been careful to keep things just plausible enough on paper. But a real audit." He tapped the flash drive. "This is the key. But that window closes when he presents his yearly numbers. 6 weeks. The countdown started ticking in my head like a bomb. 6 weeks to either expose everything or watch it get buried under creative accounting and boardroom politics. I gripped my coffee mug, barely noticing how cold it had gotten. Every minute felt precious now, every day a fuse burning shorter. The file, weight of what we knew, what we could prove, settled over the table like a storm cloud. "Why didn't you use this before?" I asked. Tom's eyes met mine. Needed the right person. Someone with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. He smiled slightly. "Someone too expensive to ignore." The diner's fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Outside, the city was waking up. People streaming into office buildings just like ours. How many of them were sitting on ticking time bombs of their own? I picked up the flash drive, feeling its weight in my palm. 6 weeks to save 2 decades of work. 6 weeks to expose a fraud. 6 weeks to either reclaim everything or lose it all for good. The next morning, Tom and I commandeered his dining room table, spreading printouts like we were planning a military campaign. Maybe we were, in a way. You ever try to organize 20 years of corporate paperwork into a weapon? It's like building a puzzle where every piece could either save you or sink you. "Start with the money," Tom said, tapping a stack of bank statements. "Follow it from approved purchase orders straight to Shield Consulting." I nodded, already sorting documents by date. The familiar rhythm of analysis settled over me. It wasn't so different from the quarterly reports I used to prepare, except this time, instead of proving profit, I was tracking theft. "Look at this pattern," I said, laying out 3 months of transactions. "Every payment to Shield is exactly $87,500, not $87,000 or $88,000. Always that exact amount." Tom leaned in, squinting through his reading glasses. "Too precise to be real consulting work. Real projects have variable costs. And here's the kicker." I pulled up an email chain on my laptop. "The purchase orders get approved on the 1st of each month, like clockwork, before any work could possibly be done." The morning bled into afternoon as we built our timeline. My coffee went cold 3 times, but I barely noticed. This was familiar territory. Spreadsheets, data points, cause and effect. The kind of methodical work that had made me too expensive. Around 4, Tom's printer hummed to life again, spitting out another batch of vendor records. "Daniel," he called from his office. "Cross-reference these ID numbers with Shield's incorporation papers." My stomach tightened as I worked. Every document we added felt like both armor and ammunition, but also like a risk. One wrong move, one overstated claim, and we'd look like bitter ex-employees with an axe to grind. I'd seen enough corporate warfare to know how fast whistleblower could become disgruntled former employee. "We need to strip out anything that sounds personal," I said, pushing back from the table. "No mentions of the firing, no commentary about Marcus's leadership style. Just numbers, dates, and documented facts." Tom nodded. "Board members don't care about feelings. They care about fiduciary duty and liability." I grabbed a legal pad and started rehearsing my presentation. In March 2023, Shield Consulting LLC received the first of 12 identical payments. I paused, frowning. "Too dry? Keep going," Tom encouraged. "Dry is credible. Emotional is suspicious." The sun was setting when I walked to the calendar on Tom's wall. 3 weeks until the board meeting. I circled the date and drew 2 hard lines under it, like I could somehow make time slow down by marking it more firmly. Back at the table, I found my hands steadier as I organized another set of files. The fear was still there, but it had crystallized into something harder, more focused. Every invoice we verified was another brick in our foundation. "Look at these email headers," Tom said suddenly. Marcus used his personal Gmail to communicate with Shield's management, not his company account. I felt a grim smile spread across my face. Rookie mistake. He was trying to keep it off the company's servers, but he copied his work email on 2 threads, Tom added. Probably didn't even notice. That puts it in the official record. Midnight crept up on us like a thief. My eyes were burning from staring at screens and fine print. But we had something solid. 3 binders of evidence, all of it documented, cross-referenced, and verified. No emotions, no accusations, just a clean trail of numbers that told their own damning story. That's when my phone buzzed. The screen showed an unknown number, but when I picked it up, a familiar contact photo appeared, one I hadn't seen since my last day at the office. My throat went dry as I stared at the name. 3 weeks left on the clock, and here was the first real counterpunch, arriving right on cue. The phone vibrated in my hand, waiting for an answer. I answered the call on the 3rd ring. "Hello? Daniel, it's Mark Chen. Got a minute?" The voice belonged to a lawyer friend who'd helped review contracts back in better days. Of course, my shoulders tensed. Mark wasn't one for casual check-ins. "Look, I need to give you a heads up. I was at Donovan's bar last night. You know, where all the tech folks hang out? Heard some talk about you that didn't sit right." The familiar taste of copper filled my mouth. "What kind of talk?" "Marcus is putting out feelers, painting a different picture of why you left. Words like performance issues and outdated skills are making the rounds. Subtle stuff. Nothing direct enough to sue over, but..." I sank into my office chair. "But enough to make people wonder." "Yeah, and he's good at it. Always starts with, 'This is just between us,' but makes the listener feel like they're getting inside info." Mark's voice hardened. "He's trying to get ahead of something. You wouldn't happen to know what that might be?" I stared at Tom's binders on my desk. "Can't discuss it right now." "Understood. Just watch yourself. These whispers have legs. I've heard versions from 3 different recruiters this week alone." After hanging up, I opened LinkedIn. Nothing obvious at first, just the usual stream of corporate buzzwords and humble brags. Then I spotted it. A post from a middle manager I'd never met, lamenting how certain veteran employees resist adapting to change, then blame leadership when natural consequences follow. The comments were worse. "Seen this movie before," wrote one VP. "Experience doesn't excuse complacency," added another. None mentioned names, but anyone who knew the players could connect the dots. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, itching to respond. But what could I say? Actually, I'm building a case against the CEO would only confirm I was bitter and vindictive. I switched to an industry forum I used to frequent. 3 threads down, someone had asked about managing out legacy employees who can't keep pace. The responses read like a carefully crafted hit piece. "Sometimes the highest paid are the least productive. Better to invest in hungry young talent. When they blame the company, you know you made the right call." The room felt smaller suddenly. I pushed back from the desk and paced, my reflection fragmenting across the dark window panes. The truth was in those binders. Solid, documented proof of fraud. But truth moves slower than rumor. And Marcus was painting me as exactly the kind of disgruntled ex-employee who'd make false accusations. How many board members would see those whispers before our evidence reached them? How many would dismiss our case as revenge from the start? My hand shook slightly as I dialed Tom's number. "They're ahead of us," I said when he answered. "Marcus is spreading stories about why I really left, making sure everyone hears his version first." "Of course he is." Tom sounded grimly unsurprised. "He knows something's coming. Question is, do we move faster or stay quiet? If we rush, we look desperate. If we wait..." I glanced at the calendar's circled date. 3 weeks is a long time for poison to spread. Remember what the founder used to say? Reputation is like glass, quick to crack, slow to fix. I pressed my forehead against the cool window. Outside, the city lights blurred into a smear of neon and shadow. What if we're too late? What if they're all so primed to distrust me that the evidence doesn't matter? "Then we make it matter," Tom said firmly. "Numbers don't care about reputation, Daniel. Neither does the SEC." After we hung up, I stood in the dark office, staring at the folders that held our case. Each page was a piece of truth, carefully gathered and verified. But truth needs credibility to be heard, and Marcus was methodically stripping mine away. The night pressed against the windows like ink. Somewhere out there, in bars and boardrooms and private messages, my professional reputation was being rewritten by a man who knew exactly how to make lies sound like concerned confidences. I picked up one of the binders, feeling its weight. 21 years of building trust. And now I had to wonder, would 3 weeks of whispers be enough to break it? I woke up with my face stuck to the keyboard, drool on the spacebar. The screen showed a jumbled mess of letters where my head had rested. 3 a.m., and the case folders seemed to mock me from the corner of my desk. Who was I kidding? Marcus had decades of corporate politics in his blood. Me? I was just the reliable guy who kept his head down and did the work. The kind of guy who gets pushed aside when slick talking matters more than actual results. You ever have one of those moments when giving up feels like the smart choice? Like you're finally being realistic instead of just defeated? My mouse hovered over the folder containing our evidence. One click and delete would end this fantasy of fighting back. I could focus on job hunting, stop obsessing over. A sharp knock made me jump. Tom stood in my doorway, 2 large cups of coffee in hand, looking like he'd read my mind through the window. Thinking about quitting? He set one coffee in front of me. The rich smell cut through my fog of doubt. How'd you know? Because I've been where you are. He pulled up a chair. 3 a.m. is when doubt does its best work. But you know what beats doubt? Volume. I wrapped my hands around the warm cup. Volume? Think about it. Like sound waves. Right now, Marcus's whispers seem loud because they're the only noise in the room. But truth? Tom tapped the folders. Truth drowns out whispers when you crank it up enough. The coffee was black and strong, just like I needed. He's got a 3-week head start on destroying my credibility. Good. Tom's eyes had that drill sergeant intensity I remembered from sales campaigns. Let him waste energy on reputation games while we build something they can't ignore. The louder he whispers, the more desperate he looks when real proof hits the table. I straightened in my chair. Something about Tom's certainty was contagious. Volume beats whispers? Every time. He pulled the nearest folder closer. But only if we make this impossible to dismiss. Every exhibit sequential. Every number verified. Every connection crystal clear. We don't ask for permission to be heard. We make them unable to ignore us. I grabbed a post-it note and wrote, "Be loud, be clean, be early." Stuck it right above my monitor where I couldn't miss it. That's it, Tom nodded. Now, show me what we've got so far. We spent the next 2 hours tightening everything. The evidence was solid, but the presentation needed work. We restructured the package. Clear exhibits, precise cross-references, and a 1-page executive summary that hit like a sledgehammer. The sky outside started to lighten as traffic thinned. I stood at the window, watching early commuters trickle onto the streets. Something had shifted inside me. That heavy blanket of resignation had lifted, replaced by a clarity I hadn't felt since the firing. "You feeling it?" Tom asked from behind me. "Yeah." I turned back to the desk. The whispers only worked because I was playing his game, trying to protect a reputation he'd already decided to destroy. Exactly. So we stopped playing defense. I sat down and aligned the final documents. The compile button waited on screen. One click would turn our scattered evidence into a single, undeniable package. My hand was steady as I reached for the mouse. "Volume beats whispers," I said quietly. Tom smiled. "Damn straight it does." The cursor blinked on the button. Everything we'd gathered, every leaked document and suspicious transfer, every carefully annotated exhibit, all ready to become something bigger than Marcus's subtle character assassination. I thought about that Tuesday morning in his office, how small he'd made me feel. But facts don't care about corner offices or expensive suits. They just wait to be heard. And we were about to turn up the volume. You know that moment right before you jump into cold water? When your muscles tense and your brain screams, "Maybe this isn't such a good idea?" That's exactly how I felt staring at my screen at 5:47 a.m., 1 week before the board's annual review. The email was ready. Simple. Direct. Stripped of anything that might read like a vendetta. The board members' addresses filled the to field. Names I'd known for years but never had reason to contact directly. Until now. "Just breathe," Tom said from across my desk. He'd insisted on being here for this moment, and I was grateful. My hands weren't quite steady as I reviewed the cover note one last time. Board members. Attached documentation requires your immediate attention before the annual review. Contents include verified contracts, internal memos, and complete payment trails showing systematic fund diversions to shell company Echo Ridge Partners, LLC. All materials are sourced from company records. Verification available upon request. Regards, Daniel Whitaker. Clean enough? I asked Tom. He nodded. Perfect. Professional, factual, impossible to dismiss as emotional. The attachment was a masterpiece of organization. Tom's decades of sales documentation experience shining through. Every exhibit numbered, every transaction traced, every shell payment highlighted in stark red. The kind of evidence that makes denials look foolish. You ever notice how the biggest moments often come down to something as simple as clicking a button? 21 years of loyalty, pride, and identity, all riding on one mouse click. "Time to be loud," Tom said quietly. My finger hovered over the mouse. I thought about Marcus sitting in his office right now, probably rehearsing whatever pretty lies he'd prepared for the board. He had no idea what was about to hit his carefully constructed house of cards. I clicked send. The progress bar crept across the screen like molasses. Funny how time slows down when you're watching something this important upload. Each percentage point felt like an hour. Don't hover, Tom advised. Once it's done, we power everything down. No checking responses, no reactive emails. Let the evidence do its work. The progress bar hit 100%. Delivery confirmations popped up one by one. 7 identical notifications that our package had landed in 7 different inboxes. My hands were trembling as I shut down the laptop. Tom was already unplugging his devices, methodically removing any temptation to monitor the fallout. Walk? He suggested. The sun was just starting to paint the sky when we stepped outside. Dawn air hit my face, cool and clean, carrying that promise of renewal that only early mornings can deliver. My legs felt wobbly, like I'd just run a marathon. 6 days, I said, more to myself than Tom. 7 including today, he corrected. Don't count days, Daniel. The work's done. Now we let it breathe. We walked in silence for a while, our footsteps echoing off empty sidewalks. Somehow, without planning it, we ended up outside the glass building where everything had changed. The same doors I'd carried my box through, trying to keep my head high while shame burned in my chest. The reflection that looked back at me now was different. Still tired, still carrying weight on my shoulders but standing straighter. The evidence was out there now, working its way through 7 minds who had the power to act on it. Feeling better? Tom asked. I studied those glass doors, remembering how final they'd felt when they closed behind me that Tuesday. Ask me in a week. Fair enough. He checked his watch. Early bird coffee? I know a place that makes it strong enough to stand a spoon in. But before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Then, buzzed again. And again. It was starting. Ever notice how your phone feels different when you're waiting for life-changing news? Heavier somehow. Like it's gained weight from all the possibility it carries. That's how mine felt at 6 a.m. the next morning, when the first response arrived. The screen lit up with a short message from Patricia Chen, the board's executive assistant. I'd known her for years. Efficient, discreet, the kind of professional who could make awkward situations feel routine. Her email was exactly what you'd expect. Mr. Whitaker. Receipt confirmed. Materials under review. Confidentiality protocols in effect. Regards, P. Chen. My hands were shaking so bad I had to set the phone down on my kitchen counter. 7 words that told me everything and nothing. Materials under review. Confidentiality protocols in effect. The board was moving, but in what direction? You know that feeling when time refuses to behave normally? That's what that day became. Every minute crawled by like honey dripping from a spoon, but somehow hours vanished in chunks I couldn't track. I must have worn a path in my living room carpet, pacing back and forth while the wall clock ticked away with maddening precision. I kept my promise to Tom. Stayed off social media, ignored the industry forums where rumors usually surfaced. Just 2 texts to him all day. Received. After Patricia's email. Quiet. When the afternoon stretched into evening with no other contact, he replied with a simple thumbs-up emoji both times. Tom understood. We were in the vacuum now. The space between action and consequence where anything more than breathing felt dangerous. Around 3 p.m., my old friend Sarah from accounting called. I almost let it go to voicemail, but she'd been good to me after the firing, kept me in the loop without compromising herself. Daniel? Something's happening, she whispered. Must have been calling from the break room. I could hear the vending machine humming in the background. Marcus has been off, snapping at people, canceling meetings. Then this afternoon his calendar filled up with blocks marked audit touch base, starting tomorrow. My throat went dry. Who's attending? Can't see the invites. But Jenny from IT said she had to rush approve visitor badges for some suits from the regional office. Sarah paused. The kind who only show up when something's burning. I thanked her and hung up, my heart hammering against my ribs. The evidence was working faster than we'd expected. The board wasn't waiting for their annual review. They were moving now. By 5:30, I couldn't take the apartment anymore. Found myself walking the old route to work, muscle memory carrying me down familiar streets until I stood across from those glass walls. The building looked different in the fading light. Less imposing, more exposed, like its armor was starting to crack. Black town cars pulled up to the curb. Men in dark suits emerged, their faces set in those careful expressions that senior management wears when something serious is happening. I recognized most of them. Regional directors, audit committee members, the kind of people who only gathered when decisions needed weight behind them. They disappeared into the lobby in twos and threes. Minutes later, lights blazed to life on the 14th floor. Executive territory, where I used to deliver quarterly reports with sweaty palms and practiced smiles. Through the windows, I could see figures moving with purpose. A conference room door swung shut, blinds drawing closed like a theater curtain. Whatever scene was about to play out, it wouldn't have an audience. The street had gone quiet. Rush hour was over, leaving just the occasional car swishing past on wet pavement. I stood there, hands in my pockets, watching my old life through layers of glass and distance. The windows threw back reflections, headlights, street lamps, and my own face looking older than I remembered. 21 years of my life had played out behind those windows. I'd watched sunrises paint them gold while finishing overnight projects, seen them mirror summer storms during endless meetings. Now they reflected someone different, still tired, still carrying the weight of what happened, but standing straighter. Someone who had finally found his voice. A text from Tom broke my reverie. Home, now. Let them work. He was right. Whatever was happening in that conference room, my part was done. The evidence would speak for itself. All those careful exhibits and highlighted numbers telling their own story in voices clearer than mine could ever be. I'd barely made it home when my phone buzzed. Sarah again. This time with just 6 words. Proof landed. Stay quiet for now. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely type. Thanks. I sank into my kitchen chair, the same one where I'd first opened that thin severance envelope, and tried to picture what was happening 14 floors up in that conference room. You ever watch one of those police shows where they lay out all the evidence, piece by piece, until the suspect's confident smirk starts to crack? That's what I imagined was playing out right now. The board chair, Stuart Reynolds, old-school banker type who'd seen every financial trick in the book, would be doing most of the talking. He always had this way of staying perfectly calm while he dismantled someone's lies. I could see it clear as day. Stuart spreading out the timeline we'd built, each date highlighted in urgent yellow. Wire confirmations showing money flowing into that shell company Marcus had set up. Vendor registrations that led nowhere except back to his own pocket. All those dots we'd connected now forming a noose. Remember that fancy term Marcus loved throwing around? Strategic cost realignment? I bet Stuart was reframing that real nice and slow, showing how those inflated expense reports painted a pretty picture of savings while actual funds disappeared down a private drain. Every efficiency initiative suddenly looking more like a shell game than strategy. My coffee had gone cold, but I couldn't stop staring into the mug, seeing those spreadsheets we'd assembled. The ones showing how my salary supposedly burdened the books, while 3 junior salaries nearly matched it. Funny how being too expensive hits different when you realize it was just projection. Marcus calling me what he actually was. The next text came at 7:43 p.m. Security repositioning near exec elevator. That's when my throat went tight. In 21 years, I'd only seen security move like that twice, both times when someone high up was being walked out. There's this specific way they do it. Professional but unmistakable. They don't crowd you, don't make a scene. Just position themselves where everyone knows there's only one way this ends. I gripped the kitchen counter, feeling the edge dig into my palms. Started counting breaths like my old track coach taught me before big races. In through the nose, hold for 3, out through the mouth. The clock on the stove blinked. 7:47, 7:48, 7:49. Sarah's next message landed at 7:52. Door opening. Just 2 words, but they hit me like a thunderclap. Everything we'd built. Every exhibit and email chain. Every late-night cross-checking dates with Tom. It was all paying off in this moment. The truth was finally louder than the whispers. I thought about Marcus sitting in that conference room, watching his carefully constructed facade crumble exhibit by exhibit. His perfect strategy falling apart in neat, numbered pages. All those cost-cutting measures exposed as nothing but cover for his own greed. Another text lit up my phone. Local PD visible in lobby. That's when I knew. This wasn't just a firing. This was the kind of exit that comes with legal consequences. The kind that strips away not just your job, but your reputation, your future prospects, maybe even your freedom. My hands had stopped shaking. For the first time since that Tuesday morning when Marcus had smiled and called me too expensive, I felt steady, centered, like gravity itself had finally sorted out which way was up. Sarah's final message for the night came at 8:07. He's gone. Board still here. More tomorrow. I walked to my window and looked out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Marcus was probably sitting in the back of a car, his world collapsing around him, the same way mine had when I carried that box past those glass doors. But there was a difference. I'd lost my job because of his lies. He was losing everything because of his own truth. Have you ever watched someone's world collapse in real time? Not the quick, clean fall of a guillotine, but the slow-motion tumble of dominoes that keeps going long after the first piece tips. That's what I witnessed from across the street at 8:42 p.m., when the board finally finished what we'd started. The glass doors I knew so well, the ones that had reflected my own box-carrying shame 3 months ago, slid open with that familiar whisper. Marcus stepped out first, flanked by 2 security guards who weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. Gone was that trademark strut, that I-own-the-room confidence that used to part crowds in the lobby. His shoulders had collapsed inward, like someone had let all the air out of him at once. You know what really got me? His eyes. They had this hollow 1,000-yard stare. The kind you see when someone's mind is racing so fast it's actually standing still. He didn't blink, didn't turn his head. Just kept those empty eyes locked straight ahead while his Italian leather shoes scuffed against the pavement. The same shoes he'd worn when he told me I was too expensive. Sarah was right about one thing. Marcus wasn't just being fired. This was an execution, corporate style. A few younger employees lingered near the entrance, phones raised like modern-day torches. Those camera flashes caught every stumble, every crack in the facade. Tomorrow, those images would flood LinkedIn, Twitter, industry forums, anywhere reputations live and die by the pixel. The same places where he'd tried to bury my name with whispers. Jesus, Tom whispered beside me. Look at his hands. I hadn't noticed at first, but Marcus was clenching and unclenching his fists, over and over like he was trying to grip something that kept slipping away. His control, maybe. Or his carefully constructed image. Both were smoke now. My phone buzzed. Another update from Sarah. Council moving to freeze accounts. Asset seizure proceedings starting tonight. That hit me like a physical weight. Not just fired, legally dismantled. Every account locked, every transaction scrutinized, every penny tracked back to its source. The kind of financial colonoscopy that leaves nothing hidden. No golden parachute, no elegant exit, no chance to spin this as a mutual parting of ways. Just the cold machinery of justice grinding into motion. The security team steered him toward a waiting car, not his usual black Tesla, but something darker, more official looking. One of the guards opened the back door while the other maintained a professional grip on Marcus's elbow. Not rough, but clear about who was in charge now. You were right, Tom said quietly. About all of it. I nodded, feeling something rise in my chest. Not quite satisfaction. That seemed too simple for the complexity of emotions churning under my ribs. This was deeper, steadier. A heat that didn't burn like humiliation had, but warmed like vindication earned through patience and precision. Marcus disappeared into the back seat, and the car pulled away from the curb with a soft purr. No squealing tires, no dramatic exit, just the quiet end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The small crowd dispersed, phones lowering as their cameras lost their target. I stood there on that same patch of sidewalk where I'd felt my world crack 3 months ago. The spring air held that same mix of exhaust and food truck spices, but everything else had shifted. The ground felt more solid under my feet. The glass walls reflected a different kind of truth now. Tom squeezed my shoulder once, then stepped back. Need a drink? I shook my head, still watching the space where the car had been. Just need to ask myself one thing. What's that? The question had been building since that first coffee with Tom. Through every late night of document review, every careful step of building our case. Now, standing in the aftermath of justice served, it finally surfaced clear and sharp. Was it worth it? 3 months slipped by like water. Each morning, I'd check my inbox out of habit, watching opportunities drift in and out without that old desperation. My consulting business was finding its feet. Nothing spectacular, but enough to keep the lights on and the mortgage paid. The rhythm felt different, healthier somehow. You ever notice how time moves differently when you're working for yourself? Then last Tuesday, an email landed that made my coffee go cold. The board secretary's name in clean, professional font. Request for operational consulting services. I had to read it twice. They wanted me back, not as an employee, but as an independent consultant. The terms were laid out in black and white. Double my old salary, project-based engagement, no badge required. Just my expertise, delivered on my schedule. Know what really got me? The line about leveraging institutional knowledge during this transition period. Corporate speak for, we need someone who remembers how things actually work. Funny how value finds its level, isn't it? I remember standing in my home office, running my thumb across my wedding ring, an old habit when big decisions land. The offer felt clean, though. No hidden angles. No power plays. Just straight business between equals. I wrote back, terms accepted, available to start Monday. Walking through those glass doors again was different. The familiar whisper as they parted. That same hint of coffee and copy toner in the air. But this time my shoulders were straight. No box in my arms, no security escort, just my laptop bag, and a consultant's confidence. The young receptionist, Katie, I think, gave me a small wave. "Welcome back, Mr. Whitaker. They've set you up on 14th floor. Executive level." Had to smile at that. I used to need special clearance just to visit up there. Now they were giving me a desk with a view. The office they'd assigned me was simple, but clean. Natural light poured through the windows, catching dust motes and golden beams. A solid wooden desk dominated the space. Not one of those modern glass things, but real wood with actual weight to it. The kind of desk that stays put. I set my laptop down and just breathed for a moment. The room felt right. No ghosts lurking in the corners, no bitter memories seeping through the walls. Just quiet potential and morning light. Opening my email, I found an empty inbox staring back at me. Clean slate. Fresh start. Everything that came before was just context now, not weight. The news about Marcus had settled into public record by then. Legal charges had stripped his accounts bare. Every dollar traced, every shell company exposed. His name had become a cautionary tale in business circles, the kind of story people whisper over drinks at industry conferences. Remember that CEO who tried to hide losses through fake cost-cutting? Heard he's selling insurance in Nevada now. I placed both hands flat on the wooden desk, feeling its solid reality under my palms. Such a different sensation from that cardboard box I'd carried out months ago. You know what I mean? How physical objects can carry whole stories in their texture. Sunlight crept across the desktop as morning eased toward noon. I opened a fresh project file and titled it, Operational Assessment, Phase 1. The cursor blinked steadily, patient, ready. No pressure, no politics. Just work that needed doing, and the right person to do it. Looking out over the city, I let myself acknowledge a simple truth. Loyalty deserves respect, not exploitation. Sometimes it takes a hard fall to learn which is which, but if you keep your spine straight and your eyes clear, the ground eventually rises up to meet you again. I turned back to my laptop, fingers finding their place on the keys. Time to build something better.